Really interesting fight. I'd say one of the most, but the most dynamic division in women's MMA right now at strawweight. We have Claudia Gadelha taking on Yan Xiaonan. And I'm really excited about this one because Claudia Gadelha, for what it's worth, has been in the division's elite for a really long time. And she's faced the toughest of competition. We can go back through her record. But if you want to look at the last five, Andrade, Esparza, former champ, Ansarov, Marcos, and Hill. And I mean, Randa Marcos, you win some, you lose some Randa Marcos. It's just how it goes. But Claudia Gadelha has been at the top of the heat for a really long time. She's at 31 right now, and you can say what you want. The Esparza fight, I thought Esparza won. The fight against Angela Hill, maybe thought Angela Hill won that fight. Her opposite, Yan Xiaonan, has been winning fights convincingly since she's joined the UFC. And again, for her, the level of competition, you really scratch your head. I mean, you look at the fights that she had outside of the UFC, we're talking binary. 2-1, 1-1, debuting fighters. It really didn't give you a good idea of what Yan Xiaonan was going to bring into the UFC. She beats Kaylin Curran. All right, you beat somebody that's 4-5. She beats Viviane Pereira, who didn't really have a good run in the UFC. She beats Yuri Kondo, no longer in the UFC. And then she beats Angela Hill, and then she puts a beatdown on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And for Yan Xiaonan, that was a coming out party. She beat her convincingly, 30-26s across the board. She looked amazing. And for Yan Xiaonan, her wrestling's good, but her striking is great. I mean, her striking so far in the UFC has been amazing, especially from distance. That's what makes this fight very interesting. What do you make of this one?
So Yan Xiaonan is going to be doing something this whole fight that Claudia Gadelha is not great at dealing with, and that is distance striking. We saw that a lot in the Angela Hill fight. When Hill was on the outside, throwing, pumping that jab, moving around a lot, using a lot of her side-to-side movement, it gives Claudia trouble because she's not the most accurate of strikers, and she can find herself kind of chasing if you do start to move a lot. That happened in the Joanna fight where she'll kind of try to throw those big Jessica Andrade type hooks, and it can get her caught at some points. And against Yan, I'm really worried about her closing that distance because I think it's safe to say Gadelha is better on the ground, just straight jiu-jitsu wise. You're not going to get an argument from me there. In wrestling, I would argue they are somewhat closer in that respect, just because the wrestling defense of Yan Xiaonan is phenomenal. It's really going to come down to what version of Claudia are we going to get. And I am famous for not knowing how or if she's going to win a fight. Every time I say she's going to win, guess what happens? She doesn't. And every time I say she's going to lose, she looks phenomenal. The Randa Marcos fight, I feel, is a really pivotal fight in her career because that was the first fight where
Which sounds crazy.
It really is, but because she had already fought for titles and whatnot, but it was the most important part of, I would say, her post-title UFC career because the women's strawweight division, and this is going to sound so heartless, but I really believe it. Come at me. You guys know what my Twitter is. I think Claudia's kind of over it. I do think the division's moved past her, and I do think that when you do have a new division, there's going to be those top fives, and then once new talent starts coming into the division, and the division finally settles into where it's going to be, some of those top fives are going to get flushed out, and we saw it with Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She was beating everyone. She was this really fun Muay Thai striker. People thought she could go up against Joanna. They have similar styles. They're both Polish. Oh my god, it's perfect. And then you see her go up against Joanna, and you're like, ugh. Was she that good? And then she just starts losing to all these other kind of up-and-comers on their way up. And not to say Claudia is going to be the next Karolina. She's going to go on a big, long losing streak and then get married. But Yan Xiaonan's not the person you really want to risk this with. If Claudia goes out there with that low-volume kind of style that she had with the Randa Marcos fight, where she's waiting for her opponent, just trying to counter with a big punch, Yan's volume is really going to add up. And I do think... I'm not going to say TKO, because for women's strawweight, it is really hard to predict, but I do think the accumulative damage is really going to wear down on Claudia.
And the really interesting thing here, and you have to take it with a grain of salt, and you've seen that last week and then this week with the added graphics that we have in here. I'm throwing in those stats, and you see it, the strike differentials, that's one of the fun things that I've taken strikes landed per minute, minus strikes absorbed per minute. That's how you get the number. But you look at the Yuri Kondo fight. That's a perfect example. And the fight against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. That's where you have Yan Xiaonan just adding to those totals and really starting to show that strikes landed per minute at 6.72 is amazing, especially for this division. And it dwarfs Claudia Gadelha's number by about 3 per minute, which is insane. She has better striking accuracy and better striking defense. But again, take that all with a grain of salt because Claudia Gadelha has been fighting the best of the best for quite some time. Yan Xiaonan's on that slow burn up to the top, and I like that. I know this is one of those Drake Riggs type of prospects that he's definitely high on. And if Drake Riggs is high on a fighter, then you should definitely pay attention 100%. To them. And Yan Xiaonan's one of those fighters. And again, her takedown accuracy and defense, 75% and 70% defense for Yan Xiaonan. Now, For Claudia Gadelha, her numbers, I mean, takedowns average per 15, 3.13. That's great, especially for this division.
100%.
Who else are you going to get that from?
Suarez,
but not many other fighters, exactly. And her accuracy at 45% and her defense 58%. That's kind of like benchmark for this division. Yan Xiaonan's is way above that. Now, I would expect that as she faces the Claudia Gadelhas and the higher end talent, the numbers are probably going to go down a little bit. But in this fight, it makes it really interesting. And if you look at the odds for this one, I'm a little surprised where they're at because for Yan Xiaonan, open to plus 110. She's now at a minus 125. The biggest mover and shaker so far on this card at a 27% line movement for your fighter, the former title challenger, Claudia Gadelha, open to minus 130, now at a plus 100. So if we have a look at the total votes over on Tapology, at a 766 votes, 65% going with Yan Xiaonan, 91% of those voters saying that she's going to win by decision. Again, I find all that interesting because name value-wise on the left-hand side, you have the name value out of Claudia Gadelha. This is a tough one because, again, I've got it as she's training out of Nick Cantone MMA, which is really, with Mark Henry and crew. And there's a lot of great training partners there as far as wrestlers are concerned. I just don't know if Claudia Gadelha's striking game has evolved to the point where she can get a win over Yan Xiaonan at this point in her career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And another thing that you always have to talk about when you talk about Claudia and her fighting style is her cardio. And yes, she's been in a lot of 5-round fights, but she's one of the odd fighters who, normally if you're in a lot of 5-round fights, your style just gets a little bit more efficient as you do it. You just realize, okay, my fights are 10 minutes longer, take a little bit off my shots, I'm going to have to fight for longer. It's like she has a punch count in fights where she can throw 100 punches, but the second she hits that limit, she gets tired.
She's on that Blake Snell level.
Exactly. So, she has to get to that level, and she's...
Or Kevin Cash is pulling you out and you're losing the World Series.
Exactly. Couldn't have described it better myself. So, I do worry about that, especially with a striker like Yan Xiaonan. If she is getting to you early in the fight, and if you do start to chase her, that card is going to get worse and worse and worse. And as this fight drags on, it's just going to keep on favoring Yan more. So, yeah, I'm going to say Yan Xiaonan. I'm not going to say finish, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Now, let's kind of switch this on its head a little bit. If Claudia Gadelha is going to go out there and get a win against Yan Xiaonan, and again, we've talked about the adversity that she's faced, there hasn't been a whole lot, really, so far in her UFC tenure. How is Claudia Gadelha going to implement her game plan to get a win over Yan Xiaonan that's been so dynamic in her UFC career?
If I was Claudia, I'd just fight like Demian Maia. I don't know why she didn't decide to do that when she first came into the UFC, because go back to UFC 212, for instance, when she did fight Karolina Kowalkiewicz, when they were still at the top of the division. She took her down, choked her out in the first round, and it was like, oh, wow. Like, if you have that in your back pocket, Claudia Gadelha is not that great of a striker. Like, she's okay. It's just her striking is quite basic. She doesn't do a lot of crazy things. Like, when you watch Weili and Joanna fight, you're like, wow, those are things I'd never be able to do ever. When you watch Claudia fight, it is sort of the striking fundamentals, and she just add in her takedown game with it. But if I was her, shoot for those takedowns early and often. Try to get top position as fast as you can. Really make the fight wear on Yan Xiaonan, because you know that your cardio is probably not at her level. So do everything you can to just wear on her. Make her feel the weight that you have. And yeah, just try to force this fight into the deeper waters. I know you would think that's a little bit counterintuitive, but I do think if she has a grappling heavy game plan, her being Claudia, I do think she can have a little bit of success in this. Again, though, I'm picking Yan Xiaonan because I don't think Claudia Gadelha can do those things. I do think the distance striking, I think the cardio and the footwork is really going to give Claudia problems. And hopefully, the Claudia Gadelha's curse has been broken off my fight predictions.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to this fight. We both have Yan Xiaonan to get the win. I'm really looking forward to this card. Okay. We have a great main event. Thiago Santos taking on Glover Teixeira. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.